Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble! Get ready to rumble!
Hi, my name is Tommy. Some people know me as Tommy Boy. If you don't know me, I'll catch you up before we get too far involved. This is going to be a podcast about cancer, specifically my journey with cancer, and it's anal cancer. I deal with it with a sense of humor, so like I tell people, ever since my diagnosis, I'm not the same asshole I used to be. Speaking of diagnosis, let's see, I was diagnosed March of 2024 with stage 3 anal cancer. The treatment was set up for 6 weeks of radiation, 2 weeks of chemo, and about 10 or 15 years of recovery time, or so it seems. We'll get into all that. We'll get into maybe talking with doctors, talking with nurses, talking with other people that have suffered with anal cancer, people that have helped me along my journey, and people that have helped other people along their journey. Stay tuned. It's going to be fun.
November is National Lung Cancer Awareness Month. Lung cancer is a leading cause of death in the United States. Smoking is a major cause of lung cancer. But even if you have never smoked, you can still be at risk. Black Americans are especially at risk for lung cancer and have a greater chance of dying from it. Research shows that early detection with CT screening can lower the risk of lung cancer death in some people based on their age, general health, and smoking history. For more information, visit radiologyinfo.org.
Yeah, I really did say it was going to be fun. It'll be interesting, and we'll learn something along the way. Then I played a lung cancer awareness commercial, and it is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, so get checked. Go talk to your doctor. With all cancers, early detection is key. It's not as bad as it used to be when we were younger, and we thought, cancer is a death diagnosis. Anybody that has cancer is going to die. No. My cancer was anal cancer, and I was diagnosed at stage 3. Now, I could have been diagnosed at stage 2 or 1, and we'll talk about that as time goes on. Early detection is key. Mine wasn't detected so early. I would like to introduce you to a few of the people that I'm going to be talking about in this podcast. First off, there's Sue. And Sue is my ex-sister-in-law. She has gone through anal cancer, and in fact, that's how I knew before I was diagnosed that that's what I was dealing with. I had a strong suspicion, and I pretty much knew it. But Sue was she guided me through everything. And yes, there's other people that guide you through, but Sue was there for me whenever I needed somebody. Then there's my first wife, Joan, and we'll talk about her. She helped me out quite a bit. She understood the whole crap in your pants part of it. My sister, Kelly. Kelly has been a big help to me. I mean, she has been the shoulder that I've leaned on. She has been my backbone along the way. She's the one that deserves the most credit. My doctor, Dr. Pierce, my radiation doctor, my nurses. We'll get into all of that as time goes on. Let's start a couple of years ago. I had to have a femoral bypass and a toe amputated. Then I had a massive infection in my foot. So they had me on daily IV antibiotics for 8 weeks. And a handful of other antibiotics that I was taking. And as you know, a lot of antibiotics cause diarrhea. And I had diarrhea forever. So diarrhea. What comes with diarrhea? Oh yeah, hemorrhoids. So I started suffering with hemorrhoids. And as I talked to my doctors about it, they're like, yep, that's hemorrhoids. And it finally got to the point where it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it started to bleed. And I was concerned, and I'm like, okay, now it's bleeding. And they're like, yeah, it does that. Hemorrhoids do that. They'll bleed. They hurt. They'll bleed. And it's like, okay, I think it's more than that. And finally, in October of 2023, my doctor took a look at it, and she said, yes, that is a rather large hemorrhoid. And I'm like, okay, what do we do? And she goes, well, you need to have a colonoscopy, so I'm going to refer you to the people, and we'll see if they can't take care of it while they're doing your colonoscopy. And so that was in October of 2023. February of 2024, I'm finally able to get into gastro, and the guy looks at it and he goes, yeah, that's a growth, and I'm going to have a surgeon remove that before we do your colonoscopy. Now, at this point, I don't want to gross you out too bad, but this growth is the size of a golf ball right next to my butthole. And it bleeds, and my diarrhea habits get worse. It's terrible. At this point, I can't work because there's times that I'll bleed through my clothes. I can't sit. I can't, So I go to the surgeon. He refers me to a surgeon to have it removed, and she looks at it. And at this point, I'm totally suspecting that it's anal cancer. And she looks at it and she goes, and I go, yeah, it's cancer, huh? And she goes, I can't make that diagnosis. She goes, what I'm going to tell you is that I'm going to take a biopsy of it and send it off. And so through all the talking and whatnot, she finally tells me, she goes, I suspect that it's a squamous cell tumor, and yes, it's anal cancer. We won't know for sure until we get the biopsy back. Well, I get the biopsy back in my MyChart, 2 days before. Actually, I got it on a Friday, and she called me on, I think, a Tuesday. So it was more than a couple of days that I knew that I had cancer before they called me to tell me that. That's the way technology works. You tend to find out stuff before. And at this point, I really kind of knew what to expect. I knew what the treatment was going to be. I just didn't know how bad it was. To me, the growth was huge, and it was uncomfortable, and, it was crazy. So she refers me to an oncologist, and we'll get into the oncologist in the next episode. This episode is more about setting it up and introducing you to who I am. So I come from a radio background. I was in radio for quite some time. I've been married a couple of times, and my last relationship was 20 years, and it ended about 4 years ago. And, I hold no ill will towards my last, and at some point I hope that me and her can become friends again. We'll see what happens. So here I am, single, have to have a toe amputation, a femoral bypass, and they go, oh, before you can do all that, you've got COVID, go home and wait for 2 weeks. So the last few years of my life have been pretty rough. And it seems like every time I start pulling it all together, life goes, here, hold my beer. And, pretty much kicks me when I'm down. So that's where I'm at heading into this. I go through the femoral bypass. I go through all that antibiotic stuff. I finally get back to work, and then I'm having a hard time driving. I was at this point, I was an independent courier, and I was driving every day from Salem to Portland, about an hour and 15. I drove from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And it was getting tough to drive. My bowel movements were getting very unpredictable, and I was losing bowel control, which is something that's you're going to go through with anal cancer. I kind of seriously expected that that's what I had during all that. And when I finally got the doctors to look at it and I finally got the diagnosis, I was actually pretty relieved. And I walked into the oncologist office knowing what to expect. And that's a big difference. And so, I really have to thank Sue for that, because as I was going through all of this, I'm giving Sue all my symptoms, and she's feeding it back to me going, yeah, I had that, I had that, I had that. Wait till this happens. Wait till this happens. And, don't be surprised when this happens. And, things started happening, and it was rough. It was tough, but I made it through. I didn't make it through unscathed, however. A lot of things took its toll on me, and a lot of it was mentally. It was a mental challenge, and in the end, I chose to go back to seeing a therapist. And my therapist is the one that's encouraging me to pull this podcast together. I talked about it through my whole journey, and I kept putting it off for one reason or another, but here it is. Hopefully it sheds some light on the situation, and it helps me, and it helps you, or somebody you know. So before I wrap this first introductory episode up, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the other support I've found outside of friends and family. There's a Facebook support group for anal cancer, and that was a huge help. My friend Sue got me into that, and there's a whole bunch of information in there. There's a whole bunch of information you can find online. Sometimes I felt like maybe I knew more than, what my doctors were telling me, but I knew better. I mean, and realize that with support groups like that, and especially the Facebook one, you're going to hear all the bad stories more than you're going to hear the good stories. People are more likely to complain about stuff or share the bad experiences than, somebody coming on there going, I pretty much had a cakewalk. I didn't suffer this. I didn't suffer that. Da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, it was a little tough, but I made it through. It was all good. You'll be fine. Nobody really does that. Everybody talks about all the terrible things that happened to them. The other support that I found, or that actually found me, and this is an interesting one, was the hospital had reached out to me with a navigation nurse. And the navigation nurse pretty much walked me through all my oncology appointments, my radiation appointments, my chemo appointments, got me hooked up with a dietitian, to talk about the foods that I ate during my treatment and what I could get away with, what I couldn't get away with, as it related to my diabetes. And she also provided me with somebody that showed me a lot of resources, like, help paying rent, gas cards, getting back and forth to the hospital. If I needed transportation, they could help me arrange that. They really helped out a great deal, and hopefully I can get a couple of them on the podcast and we can talk about some of the help and some of the things that are available to people. So that's the support that I had. That's what happened. So now, up next, we're going to talk about the journey that I went through, starting with the diagnosis all the way through to now. But that's for the next episode, my diagnosis. So stick around for that. Come back, join in, share me with your friends, and, give me some feedback. I hope that this helps somebody along the way, and I hope that they're willing to reach out. And remember, if you have anal cancer, you're going to go through some very embarrassing things. Don't be embarrassed about it. That's the way it is. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've crapped my pants, and you know what? I'm months out of treatment, and it still happens. Still happens in very public places, unfortunately. And so don't be embarrassed about it. So I think this is about the point where I'm going to wrap this episode up, and we will get together again, hopefully on a weekly basis, and we'll talk about things. We'll talk about how the cancer progressed, how my treatment went, my ups and my downs, and we'll get some other people in here, and who knows, maybe we will laugh and learn a few things. Until next week, this is Tommy. See you then.
Simply en fuego.